Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Public and Corporate Services Standing Committee of Tuesday, January 23rd. And I'd like to welcome you all to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. We have an agenda before us here, and I'm looking for an adoption of the agenda, moved by the Mayor and seconded by Councillor Race. All in favor? Motion carries. The committee minutes, I'm looking for approval of the committee minutes of November 28th, Public and Corporate Services Standing Committee minutes. Moved by Doug, seconded by Ted. All in favor? Thank you. Any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, I will jump into our agenda. I'm sorry we're starting a few minutes late here, but we had some technical difficulties which we've overcome. And so I'll hand this off to our CAO, Glenday, and Catherine Rothenberg. Thanks very much for coming to the client presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, Council. This is the Council and public launch of a program that we've been working with our employees on since August of last year. And we're quite excited to show it off to Council and let you know where we're at this point. The acronym is called the Continual Learning Improvement Benchmarking Program. We're pretty excited about the graphic. Of course, you know we did that, standard coding. And it, of course, parallels with our brand and the fact that the Chiefs in the background, we felt it was a fit.
Very clever.
Yeah. There were a bunch of people that came up with that, and you'll learn as we go forward, or find out as we go forward with this, that it's really been a co-creation of everybody putting this together. So what is the purpose of the program? Council's mandate to myself as the CAO in the organization was to create a culture of innovation. A few years back when we did the strategic plan update, we as a team asked Council to define what innovation looks like to you and to the organization. And where we landed, or where you landed, was continuous improvement. So the purpose of this program is to serve Council and the public and meet that mandate about creating that culture of innovation, high performance, through continual learning and through continual improvement. So what are the objectives of the program? Culture of innovation, as I said. We want to increase the organization's benchmarking capacity, and we want to demonstrate our culture of and results around continual improvement around the service we provide and the efficiency with which we do that. In terms of the benchmarking, there are two ways that we benchmark, and one is very empirical. So the example is the Public Works Program, the National Wastewater and Wastewater Benchmarking Initiative. Thank you. That acronym is challenging. But nonetheless, it's a national program that we are involved in, prescribed to, and operations does a fabulous job of benchmarking all of the infrastructure and capacity of operations, and then uses those benchmarks against other communities to optimize our service. There are a lot of services that we provide that are challenging to measure empirically, and this is where, as an organization, we're working towards how do we benchmark those services that we can't necessarily measure with numbers. And that's sort of our second definition of benchmarking, and how we as an organization are tackling benchmarking those other areas, and again, creating that culture of continual improvement. So how did we get here? Originally, when I thought about, okay, I have a mandate as well in the strategic plan to create benchmarking across the organization. And to be frank, I was struggling with those areas where it wasn't, we couldn't go out and participate in a specific program like Public Works has done. So how do I do that within the organization? Previously, under a different GM, Randy Stoico, if you remember him, we tried the balanced scorecard, which is something that organizations use. And we found out very quickly that this organization at this time doesn't have the capacity for a program like that. Most organizations have people dedicated to measuring within a balanced scorecard, linking merit increases and bonuses to a balanced scorecard. So that's one example. And when I went out for an expression of interest and quotes with the field of experts, I got several proposals back that were balanced scorecard or other very Catherine Rockendale from Catherine Rockendale and Associates, who is beside me today, put a proposal together that was very unique. And what it basically was, it was rather nebulous, and you'll see how we got down to the program we have, but it was more targeted towards employee engagement and building capacity for continual improvement and benchmarking. And where Catherine really impacted me in terms of choosing her and her quote was that a top-down tool, like we've done in the past, where here's your balanced scorecard departments, go away and fill that out. You know, it's finance, customer service. There are 4, and you can see how effective it is because I can't even remember it right now, but there are 4 areas within the balanced scorecard that you measure across the whole organization. What Catherine talked to me about was you take a tool like that in an organization that a lot of people don't understand benchmarking. They see it as a threat, they see it as a scorecard, and as we discovered previously is that it really didn't work to get our organization to a place where continual improvement, which is the point of benchmarking, occurred. So I liked the proposal. The initial framework that Catherine and I came up with was extraordinarily vague. And then what we did was co-create it with all of our employees. And this is where we used the IAP2 model to engage with all of our employees. And Catherine will talk about that in a second, but I'll walk through the process. So we met with a small team of general managers and our senior director about the proposal. Felt a little unwieldy, a little vague, got it a bit more narrow, took it to the rest of the managers, narrowed it down a bit more. It was challenging workshops and people couldn't wrap their heads around it. We got a lot of feedback around, you know, for me, a process map works better than a verbal narrative. And then we had another workshop with coordinator levels, employees that felt they'd be really interested in participating. Again, further refined it so that it was becoming more and more understandable. And then once we had what we felt was a fairly ready framework, we went out to every single department and we called it our roadshow launch workshops. And we went to the fire hall, somewhere outside of Municipal Hall. And so they all came to us actually, but we were on the road. And Catherine and I facilitated workshops with every single department. Most departments that were small enough, every employee came. Recreation and Public Works brought representatives, as you can imagine, with 50 employees-ish. That's a lot. And then we further refined it every time we had a workshop. So we got feedback from staff on what would work, what wouldn't, clarifying for them our objective and how do we get there. And you'll see when we talk about how we're going to communicate the successes of this program is that we haven't exactly nailed that down either. It's going to be an iterative process as we go through it. But I'll turn it over to Catherine to talk briefly about the engagement part of this project.
So as Linda mentioned, the initial concept that I proposed was very broad. It was an organizational development type of approach, but it was broad because in order for the actual culture to shift within a local government, you have so many different departments. It's a very large basically ship that you are trying to move, and unless people are actually motivated to do that themselves, and it's not driven by money, but it's driven by passion and purpose related to the work that they do every day, they get so busy in the day-to-day that, you know, it kind of drops off the side of the desk. And what we were trying to do in the large concept was to build a program that was linked to the work they were doing, and they would actually see the benefits in the work they were doing, but also that from an engagement standpoint, when you're thinking of IAP2, which a lot of people think about in terms of public engagement, and they think of public outside the organization, it's also often applied within organizations to build engagement with employees, but also with partners, lots of different ways. So when I spoke to Linda about this process, I said, you know, often when you're doing public engagement, people are doing the informed consult side. That's generally the standard practice you see. What I'm talking about here is very much moving to the other end of the spectrum, which is the involve, where we do a foundation, like basically look at the foundation of a program, we launch the concept, and we involve people in actually building the program so that each contribution, they're becoming more vested in it, it becomes their program. We collaborate with them to design and to identify and design the innovation projects. So it's not basically their managers saying, you know, I've identified this project and this is the project we're going to focus on. It says, here's kind of the parameters that council and the senior leadership team are looking at. What fits in those parameters? And basically brainstorming and taking all that information. And so very much collaborating with the employees to identify the projects. And then moving to the phase which we're moving to right now, which is really the empower. And that really is about implementing solutions and the learning, so that often the expectation is, well, we're only going to have successes. Well, as we all know, we have successes and we have failures. And sometimes things don't work the way we think, but we can take things away. But in an organization where there's a lot of pressure, you're always moving to the next deadline, you don't often reflect enough about what was the takeaway here and how can we apply that not only in our own department, but cross-departmentally. Because some departments are very good in different situations, for example, in benchmarking or solving different types of problems, and others struggle. So how can we support cross-departmental learning as well from this process? So we use that IAP2 foundation, and we still will. It's kind of it's the integral base with which we're actually supporting this whole program. So I'm going to turn it back to Linda, and I can share more of that as we go through.
Great. Thanks, Catherine. So as I mentioned, we did roadshow launch workshops, about 2 hours with each department. Part of this program is that each department has what we're calling a change champion, and that is someone that will lead and steer their department and keep this front of mind in terms of working on their project from a learning point of view. It's very important to understand that it's completely voluntary, so there's no overtime involved. Employees step up and volunteer for this. And we did emphasize we don't want it to be the manager of the department, we want it to come from within. We have created a page on the hub, which we're still working on, to upload information and use that as the portal for staff to go to. And we haven't quite figured out how the communication to the public will look yet, but that, as I mentioned, this is an iterative process. Follow-up workshops and meetings. This Thursday, actually, we'll be checking in with all of the change champions to see how it's going and provide that support. So this is our process map that we ended up creating with all of the employees weigh in. If you look at the top line, that was the launch workshop, essentially, and occurred once. So we wanted to demonstrate to the employees that they are already creating successes. They are already learning. They are already continually improving. There's a lot of examples already out there. We just weren't formally capturing them. And we wanted to kick off with that understanding of what it is we're doing. So this isn't entirely a new thing. So we did that, and we'll show you the visuals of what that created. And then the bottom two lines is indicates the cycle that will occur year after year. So the employees in their department, they workshopped the top, so what has already been our successes and our learning. And then they workshopped what project coming up should we target to analyze through the CLIMB lens. And the important thing to remember is that we didn't ask, and in fact directed departments not to create a new project. This isn't about the project itself, this is about looking at it from a lens of learning. And that was really important, because this isn't about, the other part of this is we don't want it to burden employees in terms of capacity and be seen as another project they have to do.
Creating more work.
Creating more work, that wasn't the idea. So back to the top line, when we workshopped with staff, they wrote on Post-it notes anything from the last 2 years or further back if they wanted, or some employees were only here a couple months, some have been here 20 years. They wrote down on the Post-its where they felt they had been continually improving or initiatives that they were proud of. and then posted them up on the wall. They're probably pretty difficult to read there, but this is just a visual of what they brainstormed and then talked about what did we learn. So Public Works Day is up there.
So with the app, I'm just going to jump in here,
Yeah.
Linda. With the app, because this is now in a PowerPoint, you can't actually zap in. But when we were reviewing this with the Climb Champions, I can actually project the app, and when you click on one of the post-its, it actually pops up, so the different departments can see what people have identified. It's just the way the app works. But not only did they identify these post-its and the success, we actually had a debrief conversation about the successes in terms of talking about, so what's common? What were we doing here that created all these successes? What is it that led to this? And when things didn't go as well, what was common there? And so that they got some understanding about, and there was a lot of aha moments as we went through this where people went, I never actually noticed that we did this common thing that caused something to be much more effective than other times. So we took that away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They took it.
And then the next step was, okay, let's brainstorm a project that's already on the books and what would make sense for the group, the department, to analyze it or work on it through that Climb lens, capturing what's going well, what's not, what are we learning from it. And this is again a public works project from their workshop. So they called out all kinds of different projects that are coming up. And then as a group through discussion, they decided that the project that they will be using to demonstrate continual learning or the learning that they get from it will be the new night shift position, sidewalk plowing, safe routes to school. So how well did we clear trails in the past? And now that we have our great new machine and the new position and the directive to clear safe routes to school, how much more quickly can we get there? What's the community feedback? Community feedback, as you know, can be rather anecdotal.
But as part of the process, one of the things that they're looking at is, so not only, in what ways can we actually benchmark our improvements? In other words, up to now, in this particular project, one example might be that, we were able to clean this number of streets or sidewalks in this amount of time. We were able to respond in a heavy snowfall in this amount of time. Now with this, we've actually improved our customer service, and so they can look against a baseline, and they're still identifying what is the baseline that we had, what are the things we're going to measure, and what are all the things we're going to track over time. And certainly while they can track some of the anecdotal input back, it's also very much about the quantitative. In other words, what can we measure in terms of improvements?
Mm-hmm. And the caveat there, of course, as you know, is every snowfall is different in terms of volume and how quickly it falls. And so again, there is still an element of anecdotal benchmarking here that's not as concrete. But that said, to be able to demonstrate improvement through various means is important. So I'm just these are just some examples. So finance came up with all kinds, fire, planning and building, working hard at trying to improve.
This is the neatest stuff.
Imagine that. Legislative services, I don't know what that says about them, it's a little crooked. And then,
the lines are nimble.
yes, the lines are nimble. And then this is an example of the Legislative Services Project Brainstorm, Local Government 101. So what came up for them was the information and education to different departments around all of the issues that they have to take care of. So FOIs, bylaws, things that especially when we're hiring more and more employees out of the private sector, as an example, we can't take it for granted that they know these things. So just another example of a project.
And every single department did a brainstorm like this, where they have a list of potential projects, and then they had a whole discussion with everybody there that said, okay, which one makes sense for us to focus on and really put this lens on and go do a deep dive on this particular project. And in addition, with the larger departments, they said, you know, we've identified this, but we're gonna go back, the change champions, and we're gonna check in with our departments and make sure that this actually is aligned with what all the employees see as kind of a focus area.
Yeah. And again, a reminder, these projects are all projects that the teams were already planning to complete. So again, just a reminder, this is the process map now that all the workshops have occurred. So what is your project? And then as the project's going on with the change champs reminding the teams, so what's going on with the root causes, what's going well, what's not. We're getting everybody back together in March of 2018 to go about that. At that point in that meeting, what we're going to talk about are there any organizational themes that bubble up? And we're fairly confident that they will. And what does that look like? Is the theme that, so where is the bottleneck for different departments? Is it interdepartmental communication, that it's not consistent? So our communication with Public Works is really consistent. We have something set up, but over here with Ledge Services, we seem to be having some stumbling blocks. So if that's bubbling up, that, you know, the interdepartmental communication isn't consistent, now we have something as an organization that we can target as something to improve. And the idea is that at that point, in that meeting, again, the employees are making the call, so the change champions and their managers, because otherwise it'd be too unwieldy to have 200 people in the room, is to create a team that can address that issue.
And there's systemic issues that this team is looking at. So there's two sides here. They're still going to be working on their own departmental stuff, but there's also an innovation team that's going to be looking at systemic issues in the organization that affects the whole district organizational culture.
Thank you. So the teams go back and continue to work on their projects. The innovation team then goes out and works on addressing the issue. And who's on that team will depend on what makes sense, but ideally it's cross-departmental. How long that takes, we don't know. Our goal is to circle back in September and have something to deliver to council. Now, depending on what the issue is, it could be just an update, it could be, here's our new system. But again, as I said, it's iterative and we don't know how long those things take. And is this cycle going to be annually? Is it going to be biannually, every 2 years? It's going to depend on the magnitude of those issues that bubble up. And for the first cycle, we're going to target one, just to go through and build the organization's capacity. Now back to exciting graphics. This is the idea. So the action, so the departmental project kicks off, or they can even choose a project that they're in the middle of, if it's a 2-year project as an example. As they are working on the project, the teams reflect their challenges, their successes, and then the learning part is how do we leverage those successes? How do we keep learning? They share with the organization, so the first time we do that will be in March. The organizational systemic changes or challenges bubble up. That's our initial benchmark. So, okay, interdepartmental communication is challenged. Now, do we have a number to put to that? Unlikely, other than saying we don't have a system. And this is just an example. I don't know if that's actually going to be the case. So the benchmark is we don't have a system for that. Or some people have a system, not everyone's using it. And then we go back out with the innovation team who's formed to address that challenge. They work with the organization to apply the new program or create the system change. We kick the system off and then we can benchmark the improvement. So now do we have a system that every department's aware of? Okay, there's a benchmark. A year later, who's using it consistently? Okay, now we have another benchmark. Have we created change in the organization? Yes, everyone's using this system. That's the goal. This is an example, you probably can't read it, of just a template for the change champions to use when they meet with their teams around capturing the successes and challenges. We want to keep it very simple, very user-friendly, not intimidating. And the filter over which they'll be, or through which they'll be looking is primarily service and efficiency improvement. So essentially it's, what's your project? How's it going? What are the challenges? So what are 1 to 3 successes in terms of customer service or efficiency? What were 1 to 3 challenges? What did you learn? What 3 major activities or commitments are in progress to improve your departmental challenge? and then this matrix will be brought to the March meeting, and then when we look at them all, is there a theme? Is there a systemic change we need to make?
So essentially what, in order for people to share information, if you imagine like a gallery walk, so each department would have all of their reports up there, and we'll have a whole group discussion about, okay, what is standing out from you in terms of common themes across here? You know, and we'll have a debrief conversation around takeaways from their experience to date, and also identify, well, what's really going on here? What's the root cause of this thread that's actually happening here that we keep hearing about on a number of different projects, or it's popping up, or it may be something that is, you know, we've been somebody, because what we heard when we did the workshops was, particularly from some of the longer serving employees, they said, this has been going on for quite a long time, but it hasn't really changed. And they're not sure how it's going to change. So if this starts threading up, we can actually say, okay, what needs to happen in order to support the organization to change, and to actually cross this, to share this learning across the organization to shift the culture.
In terms of communication, this is definitely still a work in progress with the employees. As I mentioned, we're creating a hub page. It's not quite ready to go yet, but this is sort of the prototype. And the hub for the community is that this is a part of our intranet system with our employees. And we will continue to look at how do we communicate outwards, how do we communicate what we're doing to the community, to council.
But to sustain the program, one of the things that we heard consistently throughout is it has to be easy for the employees to actually go and get the information, to upload and share information. There needs to be, from my experience working with many different organizations, they need a common place where they can go easily and find the tools, find information, share information, post things to other people who can respond to facilitate that learning and connectivity as well.
Yeah, the idea is not to send out a monthly big fat Word document and expect people to read it, because you know how that goes generally. Another big part of this program is the idea of storytelling. And storytelling is really key, because those are the things that transcend employees. Employees can come and go, but if the story stays, and this is where the information does get spread without employees needing to read a document or go to a website, or even though we're going to use those tools. You know, one of the stories that we tell a lot is when David Rolston, so there was the proposal to do an independent power project up on the Masher. And David Rolston did a feasibility, looked into it. Is this something that could work? Because it really does meet council's priorities around green energy, private-public partnership. What it told us, that feasibility, is that frankly it wasn't. And so through council's direction, staff didn't pursue it. But that's an example of that continual improvement and reaching beyond what we do every day. Is this an opportunity? Can we go for it? It didn't work, but don't be afraid to do those things. So that's one story that continues now to get told and helps to infuse that continual improvement in the culture. So I'll give you a moment to read that slide.
Did you want to take questions at the end of this?
Yeah, I'm almost done. I've got
Yeah, I
2 minutes
figured.
left.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay. So how are we going to sustain this program? That's of course one of the big concern, is launching this and making sure it sustains, again, transcending employees and whoever's here. It will be led from me in terms of continuing to drive it and keep it front of mind, but who sustains it are those change champions, are the employees who are across the organization. In terms of the communication, we're co-creating that. We're still working on that, as I've mentioned. The storytelling is big, and capturing that written as well as continuing to verbalize it. The website, we heard from employees, they love videos. So the snow clearing video, you know, the mayor's budget video, can we do things like that around our successes or challenges? Pictures, documents.
We heard a lot about videos. Like, people love the videos. They told stories of the planners video that they really liked, the 2 planners talking. Yeah, for the OCP. Across departments, people talked about the fact it didn't have to be two people talking, but they liked the fact, they even talked about, well, we could be talking in the background and we could actually take people in to see what we're doing and how we're changing and doing things differently. And, not just other departments, but even the public. So there was all kinds of talk about these ideas about short videos that they could create themselves to share. There was quite a bit of excitement about that.
Yeah, there was.
They had a lot of ideas. We can take them down pipes, show them how we're changing pipes. We can, all these different things, right, in terms of what are we doing differently to address some of the challenges and problems we're facing in the district.
So it was, so far it's been really fun. It's been encouraging. Most employees were getting feedback, are quite excited about it. And this really is about building benchmarking capacity and continual improvement capacity in the organization. Thank you very much.
Fabulous. Thank you. I know in my term anyway, and I'm sure, well, in all of ours, it's been really gratifying to watch the culture shift and how it continually evolves, and I think this is just another phase of that evolution. It's really nice to see how you've sort of grown this within the organization and have everybody contribute to put the idea together to how to make it work, and I think that's a real key to success of it. I know there's some other questions I have Ted right now. And anyone else,
Yeah, I think it's it's nice to keep innovation in the forefront. For me to understand it a little better, I would like to be able to read the sticky papers. I don't really have an understanding of the kind of scope of what innovation is being looked at. So also, on that same kind of thought, we should try it. Council should go through this, and we should pick our innovative ideas, and just so, for me, it would make me understand what's being done.
Through the mayor?
No, through the chair.
Oh, through the chair, I'm sorry. Are you thinking that you should pick the ones from staff, or correct your own?
We'll write our own little speeches.
Okay, gotcha.
Stick them on there, and to, for me, it would be to understand what everyone's getting excited about, what videos I'd like to see.
Oh, okay.
And, so now do you benchmark the lists as well? I mean, so you keep all those lists and then revisit it, or is it like anybody can bring an idea forward at any time and put it on the list? And then, now do they does staff send in the ideas anonymously? You see, that's why I don't understand the ideas.
Maybe go through the workshop processes.
Yeah. So through the chair, the workshop process, the first 3 squares is what created the sticky notes, or what I believe Councillor Pryor is saying is the list. And this was to introduce to the employees and have everyone wrap their heads around what is continual improvement and how do we look at it. And really what it did was illustrate it to every employee that, hey, we're already doing it. So the purpose of the Post-its wasn't to create a project out of that Post-it or benchmark that list. It was looking at previous initiatives where continual improvement occurred, or it was an innovative or interesting new initiative, or hey, that didn't work so well necessarily. The next step.
Before you go to the next step, can I just speak to one process though? So Ted, what they did is all together, they worked first in pairs, and they brainstormed ideas in pairs, and then they posted them up on and then they I would say, are there any gaps? Is there any other successes, anything else that you thought was really innovative? And then as a whole group, they added things together. So it's very much the department is sharing together. So they start small, then they add, and they're actually adding those. And so everybody's seeing the ideas being created at the same time in the Post-it.
And the ideas created are things that have already occurred. The middle line and the bottom line are how do we go, what are we going to do going forward? And this is where the teams chose, they brainstormed projects they're already doing, And so what Councillor Pryor is saying is the idea or the project was determined as a group. And then they put the climb process, which is every time you meet as a project team, what are our challenges? What's going well? What have we learned? Is there any kind of organizational or what are our stumbling blocks? So it's not a suggestion program. It's a target a project we're already doing and put the continual improvement lens on it. So I hope that helps clarify somewhat.
And Doug?
Thanks. Thanks, this is interesting. And most of this, as I was listening to the presentation, most of this I think is between staff and as a counselor, we don't see that, not directly, and it flows kind of from the CAO. But the part that the council has to play in it, I tried to sort of say, well, where do I fit in this? And I think Linda touched on it a little bit, is we want to drive innovation. That's something as the CAO outlined. But innovation to me is new ideas coming forward, and some will make it to council for some reason. It's policy change, requires funding, etc. And you touched on it, and I think the key thing is that people aren't afraid of failure, because we're not going to accept them all. That's just the reality of life. Some of them won't stick, some of them will, some of them won't. But and I think we as a council have to receive them in a constructive fashion. And in my time in council, sadly, I don't think that's always been the case. Something comes forward from staff and we trash it, sometimes in public. It's about as bad as it can get sometimes. And this council's been a lot better at receiving these new ideas and things in a more constructive framework. But the reality is that not everything, and probably internally as well, not every idea is going to sort of stick to the wall and go forward. And so the culture, I think, is not afraid of failure. Not afraid of failure is maybe the wrong word, but not afraid of the idea not being picked up on and taken. And for our part, we have to also understand that these things are coming forward. People are sticking out there, and we have to receive them in a constructive fashion, whether we accept them or not. Because otherwise you end up in that sort of classic bureaucracy where people don't want to innovate because they're safe where they are. And so everything just stays where it is and doesn't go anywhere. So to get them out of that safe space, people have to understand it's not always going to work. No, it's a really interesting issue.
Thank you, Doug. I have Patty, and Karen, and Sue, and just being cognizant of time, if we can get out of this by 10:30, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, congrats. I know when Council was first talking to CAO about how do we infuse this innovation culture, the CAO finally said, let me go back, I hear what you're saying, let me go back and frame something that I think will help work in our organization. And I think you guys have done a great job, because it's not about benchmarking, it's not about grading, it's about using information and analysis and mindfulness and introspection and reflection and groupthink and critical thinking to either improve what we're doing well or to course correct when we're not doing well. So I think this is laying a really good foundation for that. Doug talked a little bit about what innovation within an organization means, and it's not going out and finding the cutting edge this and doing that. It's really about problem solving. It's about thinking outside the box. It's about challenging the status quo. It's about all of those things in a mindful way together, and then coming up with solutions together. I was one of the questions I had as you were going through is how does this cross departments, or how do you create that collaboration? Well, for example, safe routes to school. It's an engineering issue. It's a public works issue. It's a sustainability coordinator issue. It's so how do we make sure that as we look at these things that we're benchmarking, we're not sticking in our silos? And I think as your presentation went on, you really addressed that well. And how do we together find the solution to it? And so this innovation team, I'm kind of really curious to see how that will manifest. And I think the benchmarking is, and that's a communications piece for all of us, and council included, is the benchmarking is not to see did we make the grade or did we not make the grade. It's to see if something is working or not working, and how are we proactively making sure that we're cognizant of it and we're moving forward. So I think that's a real communications piece, is this benchmarking thing is not about grading at all. And I think that's where some of these more off-the-shelf, software design things doesn't meet really the organizational change that we were looking at. So this really foundational piece, I think you should trademark climb.
Yeah.
I think it's a great, there's all sorts of great visuals, and of course it fits right in with our brand, but I think it's quite clever, and those little things matter within a context of creating cultural change within an organization. So my hand's up to you. I think you guys are well on your way, and of course this is iterative, as Linda says, and we're learning as we go, and my understanding just here anecdotally over the workshops is that, as usual with change, there's some skepticism at first, but by the end of these workshops there was a collective excitement, buy-in, and sort of a motivation, and once you get that going, they have a life of their own, and they can manifest success. So good job.
Karen?
Thanks, Chair. Well, I'm so pleased that we took an organizational development approach rather than a position of a tool approach. And I really think this is a great example of how IAP2 gets used internally, because we have really just focused on its use externally so far. I'm just curious, for my own understanding, the circle graphic that you had speaks to elevating it all to the organizational level.
Mm-hmm.
But is there like a similar circle that exists for each department so that they can track their process that mirrors the circle? Because this one speaks to how everything gets elevated and we find those common themes. But I wonder, just for each department, so that they can see their continuous improvement cycle and where it gets elevated to here, but it doesn't stop there. They've got other steps, I think, below that. Is that right?
Yeah, through the chair, we actually had a less pretty circle that Catherine and I put together.
That I drew, and I'm not very graphically inclined.
That is a great point. We can take that away and do a departmental circle and then demonstrate how it feeds into this one. So
It was kind of two
Yeah,
circles
that's
like
what I
this,
see.
and they were actually interlayered. And then I had little things going out like this, and I was like, we got to send that to the graphic person. I get where you're going, but that is not good.
but I like that suggestion.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, great job. Thank you.
We'll get the graphic woman to make it look pretty. She'll make it look like some people can
Sandra
actually.
the Guru.
Yes.
She's amazing.
Yeah, Sue?
Thanks. I'm pretty sure most of my points have been covered, and the gratitude for using IAP2. I'm glad to see that IAP2 framework is now being utilized internally as well as externally. I would like to see the IAP2 framework being extended out to the public a little bit more, and the comment that we operate at the inform level and instead of at the other end of the spectrum needs to be adjusted as well. And I really see that mesh of how how staff communicate to the public. I'd like to open that up a lot more. You mentioned doing the videos. I'm wondering about having things like an Instagram account we don't engage the younger population, and those little boomerangs and little things of like pipe changing and the stuff that's going on in the field, and a way that the public can actually follow public works, and people have their iPhones on them all the time, instead of having everything being manicured and like if there's water mains being fixed, or you can make all of that fun and shorten it, and so it's not a communication issue, but it's something that the public can follow along and see the work that's done in the field every day. So it'd be amazing to use more modern tools of social media engagement with the public, so that staff can feel like they're providing and informing the public as to some of the amazing things that go on, like the trail machine clearing safe routes to school would be amazing for the public to see, because they know we bought a big machine, but they don't necessarily aren't out in the middle of the night to see that they just wake up and the trails are cleared. But to see how their money is being spent at public works and in different departments, and have those innovations actually come forward in small bits, where if the public has concerns, they can actually engage, and not in negative ways, but actually like an Instagram account would be a lot of positive likes and engagement. So I think that would just be a really great integrate. of the IAP2 framework.
Thank you. So I have 2 minutes left, so a minute apiece to Karen and Ted. Karen?
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Councillor Pryor's not wrong. It'd be interesting to figure out how council fits into this. You know, there's the saying that fish rots from the head, so as the strategic head of the organization, if we're also not thinking about how we innovate and continuously improve, so what's the example we're setting for staff if we're not somehow connected to this process? And so it'd be interesting to contemplate that over the rest of our term and think about how that gets put in place for a new council in 2018. And it'd be interesting to engage staff in that conversation in March, possibly, about how they see the impact of council and what is our role in driving this change. And so anyway, it'd be interesting to start that conversation this year and see if there's a way to include council in the future.
Please.
Could I just say one quickly? Through the chair, great idea. Part of what we talked about when Linda and I first met was how council has actually set the direction for this in terms of, because often some of the things that you aspire or you hear from so many different aspects of the community that some of those aspirational things that you talk about, the general community may not have thought about, or some have thought about, but not all. And so very much the direction that you provided through the brainstorming that you did and what when Linda brought it through the strategic planning, when we first started and we were looking at it from an organizational development, we actually took it from the strategic plan. So your direction that you've already set actually informed how we went out and started to develop this program. So I think the idea of coming back and looping back again to council to inform that would create much more of an iterative process to ensure the whole organization is responsive to the community and responsive to its staff, because the CLIMB projects in themselves are all incubators. To Ted's point, to the chair, each of those departments are an incubator for creative, it's incentivizing creative problem solving. So then how do you do that with council as well, so that the whole organization has that flexibility?
Well, and just to that point, then, yeah, I thanks for all that. If you could send a list of each department, pick a few of those little stickies, so that I can read them, or everybody can read them, and that would just help me in understanding what kind of innovation we're looking for. And once the innovation team gets some of the ones that are picked, so I understand the innovation team will go out and say, okay, we're going to pick this one. Maybe that one should be sent to council, saying, oh, this department's working on this as an innovator.
Terrific. Well, thanks very much. I think common knowledge that I think it's a fantastic idea. We love it. Looking forward to hearing more about it. Thanks so much. We're going to move on in the agenda. The Lower Mainland Local Government Association 2018 call for nominations and resolutions for discussion. Is that Ms. Glenday taking that? No. Who's running with that one?
Go ahead.
So,
I am, okay.
yeah, council, so this is the time of year where typically items of provincial interest or resolutions that council wants to put forward for consideration at LGA occurs. This past year, 2017, there were no resolutions of council that were directed to be forwarded for consideration at this meeting for forwarding to UBCM. So last week, Councillor Pryor, I believe, mentioned that perhaps we wanted to support the that muscle thing in going forward for more consideration. But Mayor Heintzman directed that we put this on an agenda so council consider some resolutions, if any. It's not mandatory that we do that. But typically, there's been the same sort of historical items go forward around use of our firefighters on the highway, those kinds of provincial issues. Maybe it's around provincially considering regional transit and how that's managed through BC Transit, that
Sue first, that,
So foster care support workers, we don't have one. So we have a lot of parents in this community that actually have foster children that have no support worker in our community. They all have to drive down for support. The children don't have counseling. There's very little support in our community. I'm wondering if there's some sort of resolution we can bring forward on having better support workers in our community. And I'm not sure if this is other communities as well. It might be worth checking that out, but I know that currently, right now, anybody in our community that is caring for foster children has no support. They actually have to ship somebody from Victoria. If the parents have problems, they have to ship somebody from Victoria to Squamish, and the parents have to wait for that person to get here from Victoria. I find that unacceptable. So we used to have a support care worker. It's been a rotating position, but we have no longer had that position in Squamish. Yeah, so I'm wondering if we can, I'm not sure if a resolution is needed, if that's something we need to look into further. That has been a complaint from the public to me, so
That would
I
be
would
up to
like
council
that.
to have that discussion.
Yeah.
It's,
That would be
right now it's
That
in
is-
council's bailiwick,
Right.
you know, to
Right.
consider resolutions and, you know,
that might be worth
I'm not
going
sure if that's
forward to the
within our-
province with.
that might be that's a ministry,
Yeah,
UBCM discussion versus resolution consideration.
yeah.
Doug, on that, Doug?
Well, it's more on the general process. I was just looking, I mean, the deadline for these resolutions is March 23rd. A little hard to sort of decide on something today at this moment, because it's the first time we're hearing about any of these things. And so maybe I could suggest that we, individually, we might have some ideas, come up with a list and circulate them among ourselves so we can think about them, and whoever comes up with the idea, put a couple of sentences in for some background and context, and then set it down for another committee meeting to make some decisions, because I think these things go forward by council resolution, so it's the majority of us say, yes, we want to put that resolution forward.
So perhaps we could make a list and maybe put those on the next agenda?
That's typically what happens is council forwards their ideas and debate them at another meeting. Last week's council, I think this letter was actually on for correspondence and then got referred, and I believe that the mayor asked Councillor Blackman Wolf to think of some specific issues as well. So, and then they'll come forward on an agenda for consideration. This was just the jump off point.
Thank you. Well, the one that I was hoping to get on the list, and maybe I'll write it down so I don't have to send it in, is the interface on the highway between Highways Department and communities, i.e. our Cleveland Avenue intersection. Some kind of thing lobbying to make people pay more attention to those corners. We've got one of the highest accident corners in our community and nothing's happening. So I don't know if individuals want to put a resolution forward somehow to say, you know, where the government's responsible for intersections connecting to communities, they should pay more attention to them and make them safe.
I think
But
that's,
anyway, I mean, that's up for discussion.
yeah, it's true.
Save me sending it in.
And we've had that conversation with Minister Trevina many times, and
Well, what I find with,
Push
if
for it.
I may, what I find with the, LMLGA, and you go to all the resolutions and you listen to hours of resolutions where everybody's basically asking for money, or funding, and, it's a few hours, and a lot of them are good ideas, but it's, may it use all of that, the problems blah, 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 and then it's like, spend more money, and very few of them seem to make it through.
Karen?
So two come to mind that I wouldn't mind working on between now and next committee meeting. And one could get taken care of with the February budget, but I still think it's worth an effort, and that's around developing a new funding model for regional transit. So when you think about this going through LMLGA and then to UBCM, we want resolutions that actually would impact multiple communities, and I think regional transit and figuring out how we fund that so it's not the same funding share, 50-50. I think it should be more the province. So I wouldn't mind working on that one. And the other one is that I think we could start to begin a conversation with the province on municipalities being able to record natural assets in their financial statements. That would require a big change in how we report financials and our assets. Right now it can be a note in your financial statements, but we can't actually include them with a value. But there is an effort by municipalities across the country to start to look at lobbying senior levels of government to change how we're allowed to report so that we can start to include those in a more tangible way. So I wouldn't mind interfacing with one of those organizations trying to construct a resolution for that, because I'd like to see that start to happen in BC. So those are the two that I would bring back.
Sue?
Yeah, I'm really interested in those resolutions from Councillor Elliott. I'm just wondering if you're talking about provincial, so regional transportation for funding? Okay, awesome. And also with the natural assets, we still have, I've tried to pass resolutions on measuring our natural assets or actually taking in, because we can still do that with looking at our permeable surfaces and even just, recognizing our natural assets and I'm really interested in that interface and how we measure them, but financially, but not even just financially, in our own budget over the years, trying to get our natural assets to be recognized even with our mapping and recognition that our infrastructure starts at our natural assets. So I think those are really two solid things to work on.
Okay.
If there's something prohibiting us from measuring it in our financial budget, that would be awesome.
Anybody else have any comments? So, Doug?
Not to debate that issue right now, but the natural asset thing, I'm just trying to think about the meeting we have with our auditor every year, and I think the audit standards that we follow are federal or Canada-wide, if I'm not mistaken. So, we are a child of the province, and provincial legislation affects us certainly, but that either we take them out of the financial statement so it doesn't affect our audit and we treat them some other way to recognize them, or we would have to, I think, go on to FCM perhaps with that issue. But I say that without looking into it. So, but there may be issues like that around something like that.
Did you want to make a comment on that, Ms. Matthews?
Not at this time. We are looking, the GFOA was looking at natural assets last year, so we can follow up more and see where they're going with that. But right now, it's not included as part of the.
Okay, thank you. Sue?
Thanks. Many of our natural assets are also outside our community. So when I look at a natural asset, our glacier is one of the biggest concerns for me because
Somebody else's natural assets.
The glacier is our entire natural asset because it's our entire water system. We rely on the glacier melt in the summer for our water supply. And if you look at all the hydrology reports, it's definitely receding. We don't know, some reports say it's going to recede in 20 years. Some reports say longer, but most of the reports agree that it's a receding glacier and it's melting. And if we don't have that melt, our water supply is in trouble. So looking at aquifers and just planning our future on our natural assets, like our aquifers, understanding what aquifers are in our region and if we're taking those in, those are really important natural assets that we tend to just think our water supply is forever, but those are things that I really like to understand, and whether it be, because a lot of them are outside our district, I just wonder how we interface all of that.
Thank you. So on the list that we've dropped so far, I have the foster care item that Councillor Chappelle brought up. Tib was talking about the quagga mussels and the highway interface in Cleveland. Councillor Elliott brought up the funding model for regional transit and the financial vis-a-vis natural assets. So if anybody else has anything else that they'd like to contribute, so we would maybe make up the emails and move that forward, and you can have those put on an agenda item. All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the soccer field kicking wall, and Bob Smith, Public Works. You're in the hot seat, sir.
Council. Bob Smith, Director of Public Works for the district, and I brought Sue Burgent, who is the Supervisor of Parks, as my subject matter expert. So we just wanted to give a quick update on where we're at with the soccer wall, and I will let Sue take it away.
Currently, it's a soccer wall that was built approximately 10 years ago, and still needing I guess a surround surface around it. We are currently working with Squamish Youth Soccer Association to different ideas at what could be that surface. And I know Squamish Youth Soccer has looked at using materials that are existing from the what was left over from the artificial turf that was put in, and we have rolls of it put away or tucked away. We hoped last summer to actually take it out and look at it and see how much is available, what the condition is. Unfortunately, both parties couldn't get together to do that, so we're going to have to wait until spring. Have provided Youth Soccer with 3 options: gravel surface, asphalt surface, and an artificial surface. Either using existing if it works. If not, then we're looking at probably about a $50,000 touch at each side to complete that. If that's the direction they were moving to. So, and I haven't heard anything back from Youth Soccer as to what their thought is beyond they would like to see it artificial. So.
Thank you. Deb?
Yeah, thanks. I remember Uli Leckie coming and sitting in here, and I don't know if you guys remember if it was last council or this council. And he was the guy that donated that wall. He came in hat in hands asking, please, when are you guys going to finish our kicking wall? Were you there for that? I mean, that was 4 years ago. And all the council at the time said, okay, Uli, you're right, do it. And I thought the direction was to do it. And here we are 4 years later, and it's not done. I don't understand that. And I'm not pointing fingers, I'm just saying, I swore that we made a clear motion to do that, to make Uli happy, who donated a $100,000 wall. So if whatever decision we come to, it has to be ready this spring. It's got to be ready, in my opinion.
Karen?
Sue, I guess this is weather dependent. How early could we get a look at the artificial turf that we have sitting in storage?
I'm gonna say it'll have to be drier weather, like those rolls. They have been out in the exposed
Okay.
to weather. I have talked with artificial turf experts, in fact, the people that actually installed our turf field, and so they don't see there should be a problem with it. It's not exposed any more than what the stuff that's out there on the field itself. But what we don't know is how much is available in those rolls, whether it would cover that, if they're lined for that matter. I mean, it is leftover pieces from what was used for the big field. So, yeah,
Is youth soccer, are they looking to use it this spring or summer, or is this timeline up to us?
from just verbal conversation with Youth Soccer, they have dollars that they would like to, get this project going. But we have no idea of how much or what that looks like. We went and got prices of what it would look like for a brand new artificial surface was about 50,000 plus for each side. That's not all of it, and about 30,000 if we used existing material. But like I said, we don't know the condition or how much of it we actually have.
It seems to me we need to at least know that. Buy artificial turf, but we don't need to buy artificial turf.
What's the dimensions of the piece that we're trying to cover?
Off the top of my head,
Roughly?
Yeah, I would guess 20 by 20 meters would be my guess.
Doug?
Well, yeah, that was one of my questions, was how big it was, but I take it, So there's two sides to this wall, and the idea would be in a perfect world, we do both sides. $50,000, give or take, a side. Is it possible to do just one without the other? Could we phase it over 2 years, for example?
I'm sure that wouldn't.
Is that realistic and practical?
But we're talking just artificial surface, we haven't got to like fencing it or anything like that,
No.
so.
But I remember from the discussions around artificial fields when we went through the first one, my first term in council, and I know more about them than I ever wanted to know, but there's the gravel pad, the base, and then there's the underfill, and then there's the top surface. And the advantage was with the artificial field we now have is we already had the gravel base there because it was the gravel field, the all-weather field. Do we have to kind of start right from ground up? Do we have to put the base in, and do we have underfelt, or is that something we have to purchase?
I don't know what would require underneath the whole base. I'm thinking we would have to start from scratch.
Gravel up sort of thing?
Yeah. Like, I don't think we could go with it just by itself as it is now and throw on artificial turf and call it a day.
Well, as you probably know, we're in the middle of our budget discussions now. And so if we were going to make a decision on it this year, from my perspective, we'd have to have, I guess, sort of a specific proposal. You know, a staff idea, this is what it would cost for both, this is what it would cost for one. Recognizing, I guess, there would be some uncertainty. I mean, it hasn't been a for tender, but the usual kind of budget thing, and so we can actually deal with it. If we want to get it done quickly, it would have to be in this year's budget, certainly at least one side of it.
Well, we put it back in youth soccer's hands, basically, to like, you know, we've given them 3 options as to, you know,
Yeah.
what do you want to do here, and maybe up to get a response.
I know they contributed to the artificial field, or the soccer association did, but, you know, absent that discussion, you know, what's the district's part in this, or what might be the district's part in this? And they may contribute something to it, but I think as a municipal government going forward, it's a municipal asset, and my view is it would be significantly, if not entirely, municipal. We can see what they've got to maybe help the budget decision. But I think we're going to have to, I tend to agree with Councillor Pryor, you know, it's silly having a wall there we can't use. And so how would we move this forward? And I think we have to get it into this budget discussion is the way.
And further to that, then they should be apprised that there is some urgency to that. They should get back to us as quickly as possible so we can get into the budget next. Bob?
Yeah, that's excellent. That was the direction that we were looking for, is where is council on this one? Because we've been working with Squamish Youth Soccer and provided feedback, and, you know, is it them or us? So that's great. We can certainly come back with a budget number. The other thing too, just as a reminder, there was a bit of a distraction last year with the mini pitch that went in, and a lot of the focus went to that. So we worked closely with Squamish Youth Soccer to get that up and running, and that was a great success. And it was kind of the kicking wall became a bit of an afterthought. Once we got that in, then we'll see where we'll go, and here we are again. So that's great. We can come back with that, with those numbers.
Anyone else?
Well, to Councillor Race's point on 2 sides, you know, potentially there's a group looking at leasing one of the all-weather fields for a bubble. Having the kicking wall on that side done this year might not be prudent. But the one on the west side would be, you know, I'm just suggesting. I mean, I'd like to see them both done. I am a little distressed because Uli's my friend, and I swear we sat in here, and if it just got put aside for something else, I understand that too. But I swear we sat here 4 years ago and directed it done.
I'm of mind we did the same.
Well, maybe it was us and it wasn't 4 years
Well, I
ago.
think we have had that conversation at some point, at the least in this council,
Yeah,
for sure.
don't talk to me.
Anyone else? So,
Oh, on that though, so there might be information already gathered from that last time
We'll follow up.
on what just specs we need.
Councillor Rice?
Does staff want a resolution? So I'll move that staff be directed to bring back to the budget discussion options for completion of the kicking wall, I'll call it field, kicking wall field.
Seconded by Ted, all in favor? Carries. Thank you, appreciate that. And I believe you're still in the chair for the wastewater treatment plan emergency expenditure update.
Yes.
He did. People are gonna bring back proposals for the next meeting.
Put your ideas around everybody.
Nominating you.
Nominate them.
Okay. So we've had a bit of a conundrum at the wastewater treatment plant. Started on the 14th of January. Staff heard some not pleasant noises coming from our clarifier. This is a picture of our clarifier when it was new. For those who have been to the wastewater treatment plant, this is the round side of our plant. We have two operational sides. We have the older side, which is rectangular in shape, and then the newer side, which is round. So this is the inner workings of the round side. It's our clarifier. Basically, sewage gets pumped up the middle of this device, and then it goes out, and as it drops the sediment out, the solids out, pardon me, the liquid clarifies, and then that comes off and goes out to the environment after we hit it with some UV. So what happened on the 14th is we heard the noise, we shut down the system, we switched over to the old side. We've drained the tank in that time period. We've had an engineer in to do an inspection, and we just received this morning the engineer's report. So we have a budget number. It is preliminary. We've run through some estimates. We don't have the installation charges yet. We do have some of the material costs. So we've come up with a recommended budget request of $200,000 to repair this. Just so council is aware, we have been running in compliance on the old side of our system, which is great. I have to give kudos to Scott McIntyre and Chris Stanger. They are both incredibly diligent staff members and have been working very hard along with the rest of the crew at the wastewater treatment plant to make sure that we're running in compliance under a highly stressful situation. So this is where we're at. Basically, this middle bit in here is completely deformed. What happened is the unit kept turning and it got jammed, and the inner workings kept turning and basically kind of self-destructed the intersection. So what we need to replace is this section in yellow here, the middle portion, and then there's also these two squeegees that go along on the bottom of the tank that bring the solids into the middle, and it gets recirculated throughout the system, or pardon me, processed through the system. So those are the two pieces that have completely failed that need to be replaced. As we go through this, there may be others. In speaking with the engineer, he's confident that we can get away with just replacing these components. So this may be a best case scenario. I'm hoping it is the case scenario, but we're going to need to get a request to get that budget approved. And I believe the best recommendation on that was to pull that out of reserves. Ms. Matthews.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, we're treating this as an emergency expenditure under the legislation, which is why some materials have already been purchased. Then what we have to do is circle back with council and amend a financial plan. So what we're suggesting is that it come from the sewer replacement reserve. It fits the model, and we can include that in the 2018 budget with council's, preferably with a council resolution would be ideal.
Thank you. So I have, I'll get back to you in a second.
Sure.
Sue, Ted,
Is this an opportunity, is there any other innovations that since we have an opportunity to look, or is it just purely this is the best technology we have and we're just replacing it with the best idea?
Through the chair, this is not a great opportunity for us to look down any other path than repairing it. Time is not on our side on this one. The old side of the plant is handling the flows, and luckily during these higher rain events, but if we get more rain, I'm quite concerned. We want to see this back up and running just to get our capacity back.
Thank you.
Great question.
Thank you. And to Ken.
So did something get jammed in there and it just kept turning and twisted off the head or something?
I was hoping to see a pipe wrench or a rubber tire or a rock or something. I really wanted to see something that we can say, bang, that's exactly it. The engineer is talking about metal fatigue, he's talking about some different things, so we're not getting a very specific item. There are 2 fail-safes on this that failed, that is quite concerning to me, and we're ensuring that those get addressed. One of them is the drive unit, the electric drive. They have a trip out mechanism when they reach a certain amperage that they kick out. That didn't happen. And there's also a shear pin, a mechanical shear pin that didn't fail as well. As we move forward, we're going to get those drives tested to ensure that that's working properly. And we've got the original manufactured shear pin to get put back in when we get this done as part of the replacement.
Thanks. Doug and Sharon.
Yeah, 2 questions. One is, what is the timeline for getting it back online? And secondly, is there any kind of recourse to the manufacturer? Is this a warranty issue? Should the metal have failed at this point in its lifetime?
Timelines, the first question, we've ordered the parts. As Ms. Matthews mentioned, we pushed that order through last week, and apparently they should be able to manufacture within a week. So best case scenario should be complete this week, and then shipping from Toronto, so probably 2 weeks to get here, and then I'm hoping we can have installation in 2 weeks, so about 4 weeks is the timeline question. Again, the smoking gun question, there's just so many variables, a couple of different things bent. We can't completely point at what failed. So yes, we don't really have recourse, and it is, I think it was 05 that this component was put in, so it's certainly outside the warranty time.
Karen?
Yeah, 2 questions. What's the expected life of this type of equipment? So I would assume it was longer than 13 years.
It's a challenging environment. This was an interesting project when it got put in. It was a design build. You kind of hear the stories after the fact, and we have heard that some of the components were rushed and different things. And again, a lot of this stuff is rumors. You know, should it be stainless or mild steel? A lot of those different questions come up as to construction methods and materials. I would anticipate on something like this that you would get about 20 years out of it. That would be my guess. It is a very harsh environment. You know, should it catastrophically fail like this? No. Again, we have fail safes, but again, we'll work towards making sure that those fail safes are properly operational. And then there's the maintenance side of it, where you know we can get in and do some of this work that we're doing now to make things last longer. I mean, obviously this is maintenance, this is emergency repair, but this should buy us that added time. So I realize I'm not answering your question exactly bang on, but there's a lot of variables when it comes down to this equipment.
My second question is, have we communicated with the public yet about the big effort we're going through to stay in compliance? And is there anything the community can do to help us in the short term, like implementing cottage rules, or watching their water flow, or changing when they're using their water to a different time of day, so like doing laundry overnight or running dishwashers overnight? So are there things we should be communicating to the public that will help us manage this for the next 4 weeks?
Through the chair, we are working with communications on that. We've got a press release. I'm not sure if it's gone out or it's about
This morning.
it's about to go out. So we are doing that. I like the cottage rules. That's a great analogy. But the real challenge that we run into is the rain.
Yeah.
We're doing our own cottage rules by adjusting all of the lift stations to adjust how the flow comes to us.
Okay.
So we are working with that. But it really is the rain that's the big challenge. It just pushes us up above those limits.
Right.
Yeah, by all accounts, I think our staff reacted really quickly, really well. I know high pressure situation, so just want to pay my respects to that. The real concerning piece to me is the fail-safe's not working. And it sounds like it happened during the day because there was someone on site. And we actually heard something, like it was someone being close enough to hear it. So if they hadn't been on site, it happened at night, and the fail-safes fail, I just want to make sure that we're cognizant of that. And you did mention something about ensuring that the fail-safes, like testing them more often. I think I heard you say that. Is that something we'll now implement within our procedures and that type of thing?
Through the chair, yes. The one fail-safe is a shear pin. So it's not an expensive part. Very frustrating to me when that kind of stuff happens. So we're going to get the manufactured shear pin. We're going to have a couple on the shelf and have that ready. The drives typically don't fail. We're going to get this one tested to ensure that it's okay. If not, it's about a $5,000 part. If it doesn't meet the criteria, we'll get a new one. The other thing too is that this new instrumentation project that we're working on at the wastewater treatment plant would have tracked all of that information. It would have had temperatures, it would have had amperages, it would have had a histogram of all of that, and we just didn't have it connected. So that's being implemented literally as we speak right now. So this would have happened, I know, if it would have happened 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, we would have had a whole raft of information where we could have had some data to deal with. So yes, we are continually improving the plan and always finding better ways. When these things happen, we're on it to make it better.
So some of this implementation stuff will help in a situation where there may not be someone on site in the future? Thanks.
Sue?
We have an immense amount of population growth coming. Is our wastewater treatment plant, when we have little failures like this where a pen shares and we lose a tank, that's frightening with the amount of new population growth we have. Is this going to be an adequate fix and adjusted to growth as well?
Through the chair, we are working with engineering to come up with a solution for expansion of the plant, whether we have different technology within our existing infrastructure or whether we actually put a third train in. I'm a big fan of redundancy, and it shows here. Without having the other half of the plant, we'd be in a lot of trouble right now.
Is that something that we look at in this budget cycle, or is it planned for other budget cycles?
As we go through the design process with engineering, I'm the one in the background saying I'd like to see 3 trains rather than a bunch of technology in the 2 that we have. So yes, we're actively engaged in the design process.
Excellent.
And
That's in this year's budget. The pre-design is in this year's budget. We're working on that now.
Thank you, Karen.
And just specifically the capacity of the wastewater treatment plant in general in terms of population growth, so 30,000, what's the number that this system can deliver in terms of capacity?
Yeah, we're at about 18,000, what's our permit, 18.6 I think, cubic meters, and that does take us to, I need engineering to speak to the exact numbers, but it does deal a lot with our capacity. We need to deal with inflow and infiltration to make that work. That's where a lot of our challenges come from with the rain. We get a really saturated ground, that 3rd, 4th, 5th rainfall, and then all of a sudden people's sump pumps come on, and then they have an illegal connection to the sewer, and then that can cause us problems. So there's those kind of issues that are sort of the low-hanging fruit to make the plant go a little bit further. But I know engineering, as Gary mentioned, has got the plan to do the expansion of the plant to reach those population targets.
So do we have sort of an estimate of ballpark?
No, I need to get Mr. Ralston to answer in terms of population, where we're at in relation to the capacity, but the license, what are we dealing with daily on the maximum flow?
18.6 is our...
But what do we deal with typically as a maximum flow on an average day?
Depends on the weather. It would be, usually we're around 8,000 kind of dry weather flows, and yeah, we can push up to 12,000, 13,000 in a dry rain.
So half to 2/3 physical capacity in the plant. So we're not, but I mean, you don't want to be doing this with, hey, we've got to fix this in 6 months, hence we're doing this with lots of lead time.
And to that, do you need a resolution at all from us?
Matthews?
Yeah.
Do we need a resolution?
It would, yes, please, if you could just direct us and we'll put it in the budget for 2018 sewer.
Doug moves,
I-
seconded by?
If I may, I'd prefer you do it in this meeting, just,
Sure.
well, if you want to take it. Oh, sure, we can do it tonight then.
easier to do
I think we should have proper information for the special.
Okay.
Okay.
It would be
So that
ideal
would-
just because we're under the emergency
Mhm.
rules right now, so technically we're operating outside of the financial plan, so I would like council's resolution as soon as possible.
Okay, so that would come this evening? Fine, thanks. Anyone else? Patty?
Yeah, and I just want to say, maybe through to the CFO, took us a long time to get to a point within our sewer reserve to feel confident that we have enough. And, you know, this happened 6 years ago, our sewer reserve was not anywhere near what it is today. So I just wanted to make that reflection, is the financial planning that made it so that we have those reserves today to react to these types of things, because we know they're going to happen. I think particular kudos to our finance staff who've been pushing us to make sure we're squirreling away those monies responsibly.
Well, thank you. I'd like to share the kudos, actually. The engineering department and all their excellent work with asset management planning helps to kick that off. So I can't take all of that myself, but our department alone. We have a lot of
6 years ago, we would
good
have been
interdepartment cooperation.
Through the chair, me too.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you to your staff for being so diligent and getting on this right away, and for the diversion system that we got running right now and keeping us going. Thank
Thank
you.
you, I'll pass it on.
Cottage rules.
Yeah, we'll move
Does
on
everyone know
to
what
our...
cottage rules means?
I don't
I don't want to.
Yellow, let it
Oh,
L,
okay.
down.
think it was something of that.
We'll post that on the website. Moving on to the next item, which is a snow removal update from Mr. Smith. Go in the chair. Thank you, Bob. Snow removal update. Sir.
Yes, snow removal update. So we didn't think we were going to get a big storm like that after last year, and guess what, we did. So good news, our new trails machine is here now, and it's working amazingly. We're very happy with it. I've been working closely with Linda on this climb program. I think it's a good opportunity for us to really point out how we in Public Works and other areas in the district as well, but this is our project for the climb project, pardon me, this is the item. And it was just very interesting to see how we went through and we in August built a plan for doing our trails and sidewalks. Windows were open, it was a really hot day, it was people that weren't actually running the equipment, they were doing the plan. Yeah, I think this ought to work, and then all of a sudden we get into doing it and we're finding that, you know, it's performing a lot better than we anticipated. This is great, okay, we can do a little bit more, how's that gonna work? We're working with multiple departments. We've got that machine running during regular hours, 16 hours a day. We have night shift, which is roads and drainage. And then the trails maintenance operator reports to Sue under the parks during the day. So we've got multi-departments working. So it's been a real success. We found that machine has been working great. We've also modified a little bit the way that we do our road plowing. We're historically, what we would try and do is we would open the roads completely up to the catch basins, to the curb lines, and just have that open in case we got the next event and for rain. And in this last event, I went to the road supervisor and I said, let's just try and just minimize how much we open so that we can allow people to actually clear their sidewalks, because normally what we do is we store our snow on the sidewalks, and it's very challenging for them to deal with that. So we modified things a little bit. We just opened up the catch basins. We have all the marks on the asphalt to find them. So we opened up the catch basins in those critical areas. And although we got some complaints about people saying, hey, how come you didn't come by the second time, and when are you going to come? We did get some very positive feedback, and that people can actually clear their sidewalks and open their sidewalks up for transport, and that worked well. So one of the things that I picked up during Linda's chat was just having that safe space. You mentioned that during your comments, and I think that is important, that we try to be able to try things like that and see how it worked. I know the road supervisor looked at me like I had rocks in my head when I suggested it, and we've tried it and it's actually worked out okay. If we had a lot of rain or if we had significant snowfall after, we'd have to adapt. probably been graders out and put snow back out on the sidewalks, but we've tried that. So all in all, it was a very, from our perspective, it was a pretty good snow response. Of course, it happened during a holiday time and people are away and we have skeleton crews and stuff, but we did a good job. We did have some complaints, and we had I had a chat with a fellow that his wife actually fell on the trail. He wasn't too pleased with us obviously having to deal with that duress of having a loved one injured. We did a quick follow-up on that, and it was kind of an interesting thing in that this person, they've actually sold their second car so that they can cycle to work. So I think we're getting where we want to get to with those. It just puts the onus on us to keep our level of care and those expectations dealt with. So with that being said, we're adjusting. It's still kind of rolling with the punches here to see how things work, see how the new machine works, and then what we want to do is get back to you folks maybe at the next meeting or the following one to come up with a policy and procedures around how we're going to do this, so it's very clear. And I think that closes off the CLIMB program as well, and then it comes back to you with our recommendations and our innovations, and looking for your feedback to counter that. So that's, I think, my update. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, we have Doug first. And then...
Yeah, thank you. Contrary to what Councillor Chappelle said earlier, this is not a great big snow clearing machine. It's kind of a cute little thing. And the kid across the street's got a little toy car that's about the same size. He tools around the cul-de-sac in. But I saw it out chugging around, and it was quite impressive. I think, judging by the correspondence that I saw, the complaints that I saw, that we get emails and stuff, there's still a bit of a communications issue with some people in the public who I think seem to think that we clear all the sidewalks. And so I think if there's any message to get out there, it's that we clear some sidewalks. We don't clear all sidewalks. And I mean, you sent an email to us when we saw that, but I still think that message hasn't quite got to everybody. That there's a lot of places in the district that don't have sidewalks at all, so it's a bit academic, but there are people out there that still think that somehow the district needs some of their sidewalks. And so I think that's maybe something that's still a work in progress. But apart from that, no, look good. I see the corridor trail cleared all the time when I was going to Bend Park and stuff, and that's great. That's what it's for.
Thanks, yeah, I appreciate that as well. I think the difficulty in the public is that we have seniors that because we're putting all the snow on the sidewalks, you can't clear the sidewalks. If you're a senior, you're not going to get out and clear the dump that's on the road, put onto the sidewalk when it's the same height as yourself. So taking into account that if we are going to actually dump on the sidewalks, that you're not going to get out, you're not going to get the seniors out, and the seniors in our downtown couldn't get to groceries or anywhere because the snow was dumped on their sidewalks. So if we have the trail machine, I would look at the parts that are municipal sidewalks or the parts that are co-ops, getting those sidewalks cleared. There needs to be some active transportation routes in areas where it's close to shopping and there's seniors housing. And I don't worry about businesses, I don't worry about, like people that are active and can handle clearing their sidewalks, but my concern is that Government Road and our bike lane, even when it had all melted and everything had gone, the one road that people use for cycling was still full of snow and cars. So I don't know if cars couldn't get into the regular lots, but cars parking in the bike lane also makes it very difficult for snow removal. So those are the only two areas of concern. I think staff did, I think you guys did an absolutely remarkable job. That was a lot of snow at once and really hard to manage, but if we are, that's my only point, if we're going to move snow to the sidewalks and we're going to put it on the seniors' sidewalks, we have to clear those sidewalks so that seniors can get out, because the most vulnerable parts of our population are not going to get out to shovel snow if it's an unmanageable amount.
Thank you, and to that end, I see our excellent bylaws officer there, Mr. Freeman. Do you have anything you wanted to bring to the table, sir?
I could.
I saw you sitting there in the back. I didn't want you to have to come today and just sit there in the audience. Want something to throw out there?
Council, as you know, my name is Rick Freeman, Manager of Bylaw Enforcement and Animal Control with the district. And I just wanted to share with you a little bit of what bylaw enforcement did over the holiday season. We noticed a marked improvement, particularly in the downtown core from last year's event. There was significant compliance. Challenges continue with vacant properties and contacting the owners of those properties, and it made it particularly difficult because it was over the holiday season, but we were able to make contact with almost all the owners. First day of snowfall, we made contact with 45 owners in the downtown area alone. So significant improvement over last year. We've made some headway in the business areas as well. Again, a lot of the businesses were empty or they were closed during the holiday season, so that made it particularly difficult, but we were able to go back there during the week and on the weekends, because now we have weekend coverage in law enforcement, and make those contacts. And for the most part, we obtained compliance. There were a few that had particular difficulty reaching. Snow complaints were actually quite low by law enforcement this year. We only received 6 actual complaints from December 27th to January 15th. So compliance high, complaints fairly low. We issued no bylaw notices, which means that we gained significant compliance during that period. We issued 5 written warnings and 16 verbal warnings. So I think a really marked improvement over last year, and that's in conjunction with obviously the hard work that operations was able to do this year. So just a thumbnail sketch of where we're at. Councillor Chappelle, we have noticed the snow in the bike lanes and the vehicles parking as well, and we actually did take some action with that regards as well. So all in all, I think everybody's done a good job.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno. Appreciate your time. So I have now Ted and John.
Yeah, thanks, and I'm glad you're here. I didn't see the new little machine out there, but I think until we start sending property owners that don't clear their sidewalks $1,000 fines, we're gonna have major problems. And I don't wanna name the businesses, but every day I drove into town, and I always watch the sidewalks because it's been a pet peeve for years, because I shovel all mine. You try and get from the corner at McDonald's downtown, you could not get down on either side of the road with a clear sidewalk through that whole snow event. Right past, there's one real estate company there, nothing. McDonald's did not do their sidewalks. So you hit the light, you come down the highway, you hit the light, cross the street, there's a 5-foot pile of snow there. And McDonald's didn't do their sidewalks. 4 days later, they did a little path. And then coming, past the shopping center, I don't know what the gas station was that owns that triangular shaped lot, has never done their sidewalks. So everyone has to go shopping, and then they wheel down that stretch there. In town, I have to admit, everywhere downtown, like Cleveland was pretty much clear except for some vacant landowners. And I thought, well, that is a big improvement. It was really good. I saw a lot of store owners out there shoveling, and it was really nice to see that. But we have a long way to go getting, I think the safe routes to school idea, whatever it is for the main Mampcombe Road paralleling the golf course, bad enough that the snow all piles up on the side, people have to walk on the road. And the only way to get to Canadian Tire and the shopping down there is to go down Mampcombe Road. And they're walking on the road like with baby carts, and then at nighttime there's no lights going down there. So I think we have a long way to go. Nice to see the downtown clear, but I would not consider us making great leaps forward.
Okay, thank you. Karen?
I'm glad you chose this as your climb project. I'm wondering when it comes back if we can see maps so that people have a visual sort of where the priority routes are for sidewalk and trail clearing as well as the roads. Because I agree there's still an education piece with our community. and just managing expectations for what our budget is and our staffing levels, that sort of thing. But I think the visual of sort of when you're doing things and would have priority. But I mean, I know after that snow event, it was a bluebird day the next day, and when I drove past the upper part of the corridor trail, there were people already jogging on it, and that was like 10:30, which is amazing. And downtown Cleveland Avenue already had its snow cleared down the middle and the upper part of Second. And I thought that was unbelievable because I'm pretty sure it snowed until well into the night that night. So yeah, the continuous improvement is always going to be there. But I think this is a good start. We'll look forward to the findings from your project.
Thank you. Patty and Sue.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to go look at the new machine. Very cool machine. Turns on a dime, it seems, because of the articulation, and you've got the salter and the sander and the plow. And one of the things that Rich was talking about was the possibility of, in the future, of getting a snowblower attachment on the front. And I think that's where sometimes we're challenged, because we've got lots of snow pushers, but it's much harder for us to actually move snow as opposed to just keep moving it out of different lanes, whether it's a bike lane or a trail or a road. We're pushing it somewhere else. I know it's not in this year's budget, but there's talk about possibly evaluating how this winter went and seeing about maybe getting it in for next year's budget, which would mean we have another winter without a snow blower. Any idea of the cost on that and how Public Works looks at the value of that?
Yes, through the chair, we've evaluated them. They're
20,000 plus.
I think there's two models. There's the smaller model and the bigger model. So they're 20,000 for the smaller one, 32 for the bigger one. And we're certainly looking at that. Again, after last year, we said, that was kind of a one-off, and now we've got two in a row. So it's certainly more conducive to having that kind of equipment. Some of the snowblowers are quite aggressive in their cutting edges and stuff, so they can actually get through some of that tough snow. And yeah, one of the experiments we did when we had the machine is we actually did the section on the highway from Canadian Tire to the Independent on the corridor trail. That had sat there for a week. It had been pushed on there by highways, lots of salt and material in it, and we went through that with our existing equipment, or with that trails machine with the plow. It managed to get through. We did put some material on the highway that Miller Cap was quite quick to call us about.
On our infrastructure.
Yeah, so anyways, we sorted that out, but a snowblower in that situation would be great. So we're certainly looking at it, and it will be in the budget for 2019.
I was surprised in the little demo Rich did at how powerful this thing is.
Yeah.
I mean, it was going through a pile of snow this high that had sat there for 3 weeks, and it was just cement. And this thing was amazingly strong at getting through that. So it seems to be a pretty impressive.
Yeah. It's designed to do that work. That's
Yeah.
what they're made for, and it shows.
I mean, I would be interested in the snowblower option, because then you can actually get snow out of the whole built environment as opposed to just pushing it onto different pieces. We can blow it right onto highways. They'd be really clear, all of it goes onto highways. No, just kidding. But yeah, I think I grew up in Montreal, and everything was snowblowers there because there's just so much snow, and it went off sidewalks, it gets blown up onto properties, so you don't have this sort of competing asset interest in terms of just pushing the snow. And so I'd be very interested in that particular piece.
Our advantage to that as well is we could probably blow it and load it and take it away.
Exactly.
Which would be huge in some of the areas that are real trouble spots.
Do we have any snowblower, like big snowblower type things, or do we do mostly?
We've got three push.
We have 3 walk behinds.
Yeah. Oh, just the ones. There's the small walk behinds, not any attachment on them.
Correct.
Well, despite our vacillation in purchasing that machine, I think it's been a good investment, and
Excellent investment.
it's a great, to Councillor Elliott's point about having that as part of the climb program, I think is a great way to innovate, to start, you can benchmark that right from the get-go as its first use out.
Yeah.
Terrific.
And really interested to see how it works on some of the trail stuff in the summer and
Yeah.
maximize that opportunity.
And I have Sue still to.
Yeah, I forgot to mention transit stops as well. I stopped with my truck to help a person with a walker, who couldn't get to the bus because the snow had been blown up Cleveland Avenue, so none of our transit stops had been cleared. We need to leave pathways at our transit stops for transit users to get on and off, because we wanted to actually, during big snow events, when people can't dig out their cars, they're gonna have to take transit, so ensuring that our transit stops are cleared with pathways, even if we're blowing snow up, that they still have a walkway to get out, because all the bus stops on Cleveland Avenue, all the snow had been shoveled up, and the people that were trying to take transit couldn't get up and over to their bus. So that's
Yep.
something to be cognizant of.
Part of that whole process of reviewing and re-reviewing is looking at those maps. So everything that's been talked about, we're on the senior center, the McDonald's, all that stuff we're looking into. And Sue is actually the one that looks after the bus stop, so she's clear, very aware of where we are.
Yes.
How to,
Oh, that was insane.
We're currently working on, keep tweaking the map that we started out creating. It's changed on different occasions. And yesterday again, we're looking at reviewing it, again as to, how we want this to look. And definitely the seniors want to make sure that they can have a safe walkway to get to the Save On or get to Cleveland Avenue or, without breaking a hip. So really, that is very key, very important.
I appreciate that.
Doug?
Just to my colleague, Councillor Mayor Heinzman, are you talking about it for this year in the budget or next year?
I would be open to it this year. I thought it was gonna be more expensive. If it's in that $20,000-$25,000 range, I think it's an attachment that will be really useful, but.
That was my thought too, because obviously we won't evaluate it for the summer because we haven't had the summer yet, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about during snow season. I would leave the option open of bringing it to the budget conversation this year.
And if I may, I think if we're gonna do it, might as well do it right. If it's 32,000 or something like that for the larger one, there's no sense in buying a smaller one only to find it's inadequate.
Take your
If we're gonna
recommendation.
go big or go home, right? For the $12,000 difference. Thanks very much, and kudos to your staff.
Thank you.
On all fronts today. Do we have anything else? Any other comments before we close out?
I gather some citizens have brought muffins to the public works yard, so. No, that's awesome.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Status of recommendations to council, do you have any?
Usually they're listed.
I just wonder if anybody has anything to bring up. Any referrals from council? No. Roundtable discussion, anybody have anything to like to throw out there? Ted?
And I know we've talked about this numerous times, but I think we did pass some kind of soil bylaw to stop the spread of invasive species and to anybody that's doing an excavation has to take out a permit and figure out where their material's going and what's in it. And then we have 100 loads from Vancouver, North Van, West Van, Surrey, Delta coming up and being dumped in the community every day. What do we do about that? And I think that it's very valid. From what I've been told, Squamish is the only community that allows out-of-town fill to come in and be dumped in the municipality. So if that's true, we have to close that loophole. Because, we went through this a couple of times. It's going to job sites for fill, in which case it should be, it's got to be certified. You can't just dump crap in. And it's going to the Upper Squamish, it's going to our Woodway site, apparently going to our Woodway site that's been set aside by the province for our logging industry to use as a dump site. So that's getting filled up by truckload after truckload coming from the city. And we talked about this last year or the year before, whatever it was, we did this council. And I thought we kind of curbed that, but if we have to have bylaw follow a few of these trucks that are pulling into town and say, oh, have you got something registered, can you show me what's in your load there so I can allow you to dump it in our community, or do you have a permit for dumping in Squamish, or where's your business license for being, when do we stop these people?
Through the chair, the new soils bylaw has yet to be adopted, so currently we're still relying on the site alteration bylaw. And I will follow up with staff in terms of the facts around that, in terms of people from out of town dumping fill and what our process is, and also when that soils bylaw is scheduled to come back. I know the staff went out for some engagement on it after it first came to council. I'll follow up on those two things for council.
Just to follow up on that, Linda, maybe could you phone through your cohorts and find out what, if they allow random trucks coming into the community, you know, like other communities?
Through the chair, I would like to think that that's part of what staff's analysis is when they're doing their bylaw, but I'll make that suggestion.
Oh, Sue, go ahead. Good, done.
Yeah, interesting discussion point, and I don't know the answers to these things. I suspect that there are, I mean, I think about the gravel proposal for Nav Creek, for example, and stuff like that. That's to supply lower mainland road systems. So my guess is that there's stuff moving around, but it might be different types of soil, for example, gravel versus dirt that things can grow in. But it is an interesting discussion. I know the oceanfront is planning on some kind of barge loading for the fill that they require, and so some of it will be structural fill you can put buildings on, but a lot of it I think will be just topsoil that you put trees and plants in. So it's certainly something I think we want to see the bylaw kind of come to the table and have a discussion around that.
Penny?
Yeah, I think the bylaw's gone on too long. Like, the last time we saw this was almost a year ago, so I'm really encouraging staff to get that in front of us soon. I think it also, these issues come up with dumping and within the SLRD too. So a real collaborative approach with the SLRD, communicating with each other. A lot of the trucks are coming through Squamish and going up the Squamish Valley or other places that are technically outside the district, but there's still a joint problem that both the SLRD and district have. So just to make sure that that communication and collaboration and vigilance amongst both governments is important.
Thank you. And Sue?
Thanks, it's not on the fill. I'm just wondering about the bylaws for garbage responsibility for owners to actually supply areas for garbage. And I think that a lot of, we haven't actually looked, it's something that we have to look at, is like in our bylaws, do we actually have owners of buildings, current owners of buildings, allow for space, maybe Robin can answer that, allow for space for garbage? And or if it's,
yeah, through the chair, that's part of planning's bylaw updates in terms of what's required of multifamily
perfect,
developments and
not just commercial as well, because there's nothing commercial right now.
I'll follow up with staff in terms of that.
That'd be great, thank you.
And Ted?
On the landfill garbage topic, I understand that China's not taking our recycles anymore, and I wondered if that's hit City Hall yet, or are we going to be, that's going to kick up a major opportunity for initiatives to start looking after our own plastics.
I'm sorry, through the chair, I was writing a note from the last question and I missed that.
Just China's not taking recycles anymore. That was kind of announced at the first of the year. So they're not taking the ship containers full of plastics and all the things that we've been recycling that have been containerized and sent to China. They don't take it anymore. We've been sending over too many contaminated loads. And I just wondered if it's going to hit us one of these days.
The alternative maybe to that. Good point. Penny?
Yeah, just on that, how much longer is our current contract with our provider? Do you know?
It goes into the next term.
Yes, okay. Because, I mean, they sell and purchase at a rate, and so we're kind of buffered through. There might be something in the contract that allows for wiggle room on that, but anyway, I'm just curious. Thank you.
Sure.
That's an interesting point, and so a future agenda item might be a presentation from the provider, because I had a conversation with one of their senior employees about the amount of contamination that's presently in the recycling. And so it's great that we're recycling. It's not great that we're contaminating what we're putting out in the recycling bin. So, so there's certainly room for improvement there. So, and if you like, I can put you in contact with that person, and she's the one that I think would probably end up making the presentation.
And in conjunction with that, I think it's a good message to get out into the community too.
Well,
It's great that you guys are recycling and everybody's doing their part, but please make sure that the stuff isn't contaminated when you do go to those lengths. Just take that extra little step to wash it out or whatever is required. Make sure it is still recyclable.
And I don't, to respond to that, I don't know if they have a plan for that yet, but I think maybe the first discussion we can have is right here before it kind of goes out there. So it's kind of a coordinated effort.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Great. Thank you very much. So I will look for a move to terminate from Doug, Ted, seconded, and all in favor. Motion carries. Thank you very much.